Have you ever noticed that some questions become harder to ask as we get older? Not because they matter less, but because somewhere along the way we were taught they were embarrassing. And for a lot of men, especially after 50 or 60, one of those questions sounds like this. If I ejaculate every day, is that healthy, harmful, or something in between? It's a quiet question, a private question, and often it's a question loaded with fear. Fear that you're doing too much, fear that you're doing too little, fear that your body is changing in ways you don't understand, fear that the answers out there are either exaggerated, moralized, or completely disconnected from what real men actually experience as they age. So today, let's clear the air. Not with shame, not with hype, not with teenage myths disguised as medical advice, but with a calm, realistic conversation about what daily ejaculation can actually mean for the male body, especially in later life. Because the truth is far more nuanced than most people think. For some men, daily ejaculation may feel completely fine. For others, it may quietly contribute to fatigue, pelvic tension, irritability, poor sleep, or a sense that something just feels off. And that difference matters, because when it comes to the aging male body, the biggest mistake is not asking the question. The biggest mistake is assuming there must be one universal answer for everyone. There isn't. And once you understand that, the entire conversation changes. Let's start with the myth that creates the most confusion. A lot of men grow up hearing one of two extreme messages. The first message says, more is better, as if frequent ejaculation is automatically a sign of health, vitality, masculinity, and hormonal strength. The second message says, you're depleting yourself, as if ejaculation is some kind of drain on male power, energy, or longevity, and every release weakens the body. Both ideas survive because they're simple, and simple answers spread fast. But the body is rarely that simple. Ejaculation is not a miracle cure. It is also not a guaranteed source of damage. It's a biological event, and like many biological events, its effect depends on context, your age, your recovery, your stress level, your sleep quality, your hormone profile, your relationship status, your general health, your pelvic floor condition, your prostate symptoms, and most importantly, how your body responds afterward. That last part is where many men lose the plot. They keep asking, how often is too often? But a better question is, what happens to me when I do this regularly? That is the question that actually reveals the truth. Let's make this practical. When ejaculation occurs, several things happen at once. There's nervous system activation. There's a change in blood flow. Pelvic muscles contract rhythmically. The prostate contributes fluid. Neurochemicals shift. Pleasure and anticipation often involve dopamine. Relaxation and emotional closeness may involve oxytocin. Stress relief may be supported by endorphin activity. Afterward, some men feel calm, sleepy, or reset, which can be influenced by the body's post-orgasm chemistry. In plain language, the body often moves from stimulation to release to recovery. That sequence can feel good. It can reduce tension. It can improve mood temporarily. It can help some men fall asleep more easily. It may even leave some men feeling more settled and less restless. So if a man says, I feel relaxed, comfortable, and normal afterward, that is not unusual. But here is where age becomes an important part of the story. This is where many online discussions go off track. A 25-year-old and a 65-year-old are not operating with the same biological margin. That doesn't mean the older body is broken. It means the older body is more honest. At younger ages, men can often ignore poor sleep, chronic stress, dehydration, overuse, and still bounce back quickly. Later in life, the body becomes less forgiving. Not cruel, just clearer. If you are over 60, you may notice that recovery from many things is different than it used to be. A bad night of sleep hits harder. Stress lingers longer. Muscle soreness stays longer. Hormonal fluctuations feel more noticeable. And overstimulation may no longer be free. That matters because ejaculation doesn't happen in a vacuum. If your sleep is poor, your hydration is off, your pelvic floor is tight, your prostate is irritated, and your nervous system is already overstimulated, then daily ejaculation may not land in the body the same way it once did. And when men ignore that, they often get confused. They think, "This used to feel fine. Why does it leave me drained now?" The answer may not be that ejaculation is bad. The answer may be that your body is asking for a different rhythm than before. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. And adaptation is one of the most important parts of aging well. If I were sitting across from a man in clinic and he asked me whether daily ejaculation was healthy, I would not begin with a lecture. I would begin with a question. How do you feel afterward? Not just in the next 5 minutes, but later that day, that evening, and the next morning. That question tells you almost everything. Do you feel relaxed and normal? Do you sleep better? Do you feel emotionally steady? Do you feel physically comfortable? Or do you feel flat, irritable, heavy, sore, or mentally unfocused? Do you notice pelvic pressure? Do you feel more urinary urgency? Do you wake more often at night? Do you feel as though the act is taking more than it gives? That is the body giving feedback, and feedback is more valuable than ideology. One man may handle daily ejaculation with no issue at all. Another man may discover that 3 or 4 times a week feels much better. Another may notice that his frequency is fine, but only when stress is low and sleep is good. Another may realize the issue is not frequency, but the way he is using the behavior. That is why once a day cannot be judged in isolation. Frequency is only one variable. Response is the real story. Now let's talk about one of the most overlooked issues in this entire subject. Not every sexual behavior comes from genuine desire. Sometimes it comes from habit, and that difference matters more than people realize. Desire feels alive. It has a sense of readiness, a natural pull, a real interest. Habit feels automatic, predictable, sometimes emotionally flat, sometimes driven more by routine than by authentic arousal or connection. Why is that important? Because when a behavior becomes highly habitual, you may continue doing it even when the body is no longer truly asking for it. At that point, the question is no longer, is this healthy in theory? The question becomes, why am I doing this right now? Out of pleasure? Out of connection? Out of genuine release? Or because it's become a default button for boredom, anxiety, restlessness, loneliness, or sleep problems? This is where self-awareness becomes more useful than rules, because if ejaculation is serving as a substitute for emotional regulation, it may provide a short-term shift while quietly leaving the real issue untouched. And that can create a cycle. Stress rises, you seek quick relief, relief comes briefly, the core problem remains. The urge returns, satisfaction drops, confusion grows. That is not a moral failure, it's simply a pattern, and patterns can be changed once they are seen clearly. Daily ejaculation and stress, relief or escape? Here's another area that deserves a more mature conversation. Many men do not realize how often sexual behavior becomes tied to emotional management. This happens quietly. A man may tell himself he's acting from normal desire, but if he looks carefully, he may notice it happens most when he feels tense, disconnected, frustrated, anxious, or alone. That doesn't mean the behavior is wrong. It means it may be doing more than one job. And if you ask any behavior to carry too many emotional burdens, it usually stops working as well. A helpful question is this: what am I actually needing right now? Do I need physical release? Do I need sleep? Do I need closeness? Do I need comfort? Do I need purpose? Do I need to calm my nervous system? Do I simply need to stop scrolling, stop worrying, and put the day down? Sometimes daily ejaculation is not the problem. Sometimes it's just the visible tip of a larger issue: chronic stress, emotional isolation, lack of touch, poor sleep, loss of meaning, unresolved grief, or the subtle ache of aging in a culture that rarely teaches men how to process change with grace. That's why older men deserve better advice than "do it more" or "stop doing it." They deserve depth. Now let's move into the topic that worries many men most: the prostate. Some men have heard that regular ejaculation may support prostate health. Others have heard that frequent ejaculation can irritate the prostate. Which one is true? In practical life, both ideas can be partially true depending on the man and the condition of the gland. If the prostate is calm and symptoms are minimal, regular ejaculation may feel neutral or beneficial. But if the prostate is enlarged, inflamed, congested, or already sensitive, then daily stimulation may not feel supportive. It may feel aggravating. How would a man notice that? Usually not through a lab number first, usually through symptoms: more pelvic heaviness, more urinary urgency, more nighttime urination, a dull ache after ejaculation, a sense of pressure or irritation, less comfort than before. This is where rigid rules fail, because regular is not the same as constant, and possible benefit is not the same as more is always better. A smart approach is not to chase a perfect number. A smart approach is to observe patterns. If symptoms are better with more recovery days, that matters. If symptoms worsen with daily stimulation, that matters. If no symptoms appear and energy remains strong, that matters too. Your body may not speak in slogans, but it does speak. This is a topic almost nobody talks about enough: the pelvic floor. For many older men, the pelvic floor is a missing piece of the puzzle. These muscles play a role in urinary control, sexual function, pelvic support, and sensation. And like any muscle group, they can be weak, uncoordinated, or overly tight. That last part is especially important. A lot of men assume pelvic problems come only from weakness, but some men actually have too much tension, and in that case, more stimulation without adequate recovery may create tightness, discomfort, reduced pleasure, or odd urinary symptoms. If a man notices that daily ejaculation leaves him with tension, soreness, or a sense of tightness rather than ease, the issue may not be desire at all. It may be overuse or poor recovery in a muscle system he has never thought about. This is why balance matters: not just activity, recovery; not just stimulation, support; not just frequency, function. Sometimes the body responds better when you stop forcing a rhythm and start respecting one. Now let's talk about something that may be more damaging than the physical act itself. Shame. Shame around aging, shame around desire, shame around masturbation, shame around needing sexual expression later in life, shame around not wanting it as often as before, shame around wanting it more than expected. This is a miserable burden for many men. Because shame distorts the conversation no matter what direction it goes. If a man ejaculates often, shame may tell him he's weak or excessive. If he ejaculates rarely, shame may tell him he's losing his masculinity. If his body changes, shame may tell him something is wrong with him. If his desire remains strong in older age, shame may tell him he should have outgrown it. None of that is wisdom. It's noise. And stress built on shame is not harmless. Stress affects sleep. Stress affects mood. Stress affects confidence. Stress affects energy. Stress affects how the body interprets arousal, performance, and recovery. In many cases, men suffer not because of the act itself, but because they are trapped in constant self-judgment before, during, and after it. That emotional tension changes everything. The body does better when it is listened to than when it is scolded. This is the question everybody wants answered with one neat sentence. But I won't insult you with a fake universal number. Healthy frequency is the frequency that leaves you feeling more regulated, not more depleted, more clear, not more foggy, more comfortable, not more irritated, more at ease, not more ashamed. For some men, that may be daily. For others, every other day. For others, 2 to 4 times per week. For others, it changes depending on sleep, stress, medications, prostate symptoms, or relationship context. And that variability is normal. The real goal is not to match another man's pattern. The goal is to find a rhythm your own body can sustain with dignity. That word matters, dignity, because sexual health after 60 is not about chasing youth. It's about learning a smarter relationship with your body than you had at 25. If you want to evaluate whether daily ejaculation is working for you, use this simple framework. First, track your aftermath. For 1 or 2 weeks, pay attention to what happens after ejaculation, not just pleasure in the moment. Ask, how is my energy later? How is my sleep? How is my mood? How is my focus? How is my pelvic comfort? How is my urination? Patterns show up faster than most men expect. Second, separate desire from routine. Before acting, pause for a moment and ask, is this desire or is this habit? That one question can change behavior without force. Third, look at the rest of your health. Poor sleep, stress, alcohol, dehydration, inactivity, medications, depression, and loneliness all affect sexual function and recovery. Don't blame everything on frequency if the rest of the foundation is unstable. Fourth, give recovery some respect. Rest is not failure. If the body feels better with space between episodes, that is not a sign you are broken. That is useful information. Fifth, do not ignore discomfort. Pelvic pain, urinary changes, worsening nighttime urination, or a sense of pressure should not be brushed aside forever. Listen early rather than late. Sixth, remove moral judgment from the equation. Biology needs observation, not humiliation. That shift alone can relieve a surprising amount of tension. Here's what I find fascinating. When men stop obsessing over whether they are normal, they often start feeling better. When they stop pushing against the body and start listening to it, they often make small adjustments that have outsized benefits. Maybe they reduce frequency slightly. Maybe they improve sleep. Maybe they hydrate better. Maybe they stop using sexual release as their only stress outlet. Maybe they work on mobility, walking, pelvic health, or nervous system calm. Maybe they address loneliness instead of masking it. Maybe they release old guilt they've carried for decades. And then something interesting happens. They don't just feel less worried. They feel more stable, more in control, more at peace, more respectful toward themselves, sometimes even more vital. Because vitality is not the same thing as frequency. Vitality is the quality of your relationship with your own body. That is a much deeper metric. So what does daily ejaculation really do to the male body? It may relax some men. It may help some men sleep. It may feel physically fine for some men. It may be neutral for others. And for some, especially when age, stress, prostate sensitivity, or pelvic tension are in the mix, it may be too much. The act itself is not the whole story. The context is the story. Your recovery is the story. Your body's feedback is the story. Your emotional state is part of the story. And your willingness to be honest with yourself is the story underneath all the others. If there is one message worth taking away today, it is this. Stop asking whether daily ejaculation is universally good or bad. Start asking whether it is working well for your body, your energy, your mood, and your stage of life. That is the wiser question, and wisdom matters more with age, not less. Because aging is not just a process of losing things, it can also be a process of refining things, refining habits, refining awareness, refining what actually serves you, refining the difference between compulsion and choice, refining the difference between performance and well-being, and, perhaps most importantly, refining the way you speak to yourself, not as an embarrassed boy, not as a man trying to prove something, but as an adult human being learning how to live in his changing body with honesty and self-respect. That kind of maturity is powerful, and it lasts longer than myths ever do. So if this topic has been sitting in the back of your mind for a while, let this be your reminder. You do not need to panic. You do not need to feel ashamed. You do not need to blindly follow extreme advice. You need awareness. You need honesty. You need a willingness to notice what your body is telling you. And sometimes that alone is enough to move from confusion to clarity, from self-judgment to self-understanding, from habit to intention, from anxiety to a steadier kind of confidence. And that confidence is not about pretending you're still 25. It's about becoming the kind of man who understands his body better now than he ever did before. That is not decline. That is growth. And in many ways, that is where real strength begins. So the next time this question comes to mind, don't ask it with fear. Ask it with curiosity. Then listen carefully, because your body may already be giving you the answer. And once you start hearing it clearly, you may find that this conversation is not really just about ejaculation at all. It's about recovery. It's about awareness. It's about dignity. It's about learning what your body needs in this season of life. And that is a conversation worth continuing.